Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much to the CODART team, and also thank you to all of you for staying. I'm really thrilled to have this opportunity to just touch on a subject dear to my heart, and I think central to the themes of the conference today and tomorrow. So from the 14th century, pretty much through to watching museum visitors' reactions in the present, I think the appeal of tapestry over and above the other figurative arts has a lot to do with scale. Room to tell a design. Room to develop a sequential narrative in one hanging or in a whole series of hangings. Space to play with perspective and illusionism on a room-enveloping scale. Even room to encompass within one hanging an entire suite of large paintings. Though the earliest European figurative tapestries sprung from Paris, the most productive centers soon concentrated northwards. By 1402, Arras in Artois, and then we get to Dornick or Tournai in Hainaut, and then certainly by the 1440s to Brussels, Brugge, Oudenaarde, Edinge, Antwerp. For 300 years, roughly 1400 to 1700, the counties of Brabant and Flanders dominated European tapestry production. It's only fitting that for such a monumental scale medium, it should engage with the market on a similarly gargantuan scale. Of the examples I've just shown you, all but one were designed in Flanders or in Flemish-speaking regions, and all were woven in Brabant or Flanders, all made for export. And I'm really glad that Joris already touched on this in his superlative marathon through Flemish art on the international context this morning, the importance of tapestries. This Justice of Trajan and Herkenbald, inspired by Rogier van der Weyden's paintings in Brussels Town Hall, was probably also woven in Brussels, but it was certainly in the Vaud, belonging to Georges de Saluces, who's the Bishop of Lausanne, by 1461. Other editions may have reached London and Ferrara around the same time. Across the centuries, it's the same pattern. Here, designed in Antwerp, woven in Brussels, and on completion, delivered to Madrid and the convent of the Descalzes Reales by the command of Archduchess Isabella Clara Eugenia. Here, although designed in Rome, it was again woven in Brussels and delivered to Pope Leo X to hang in the Vatican's Sistine Chapel, as you see them here. Designed in Antwerp, woven in Brussels, delivered to London. And again, now designed and woven in Brugge, which already enjoyed an international reputation for this type of long, low choir tapestry. This one was commissioned at the request of a very wealthy parish church of Saint Vincent in Rouen in Normandy. And right at the tail end of Flanders' dominance of the medium, spectacularly woven and designed in Brussels and made for Maximilian Emanuel's palace at Schleißheim near Munich. Representative of the broader context, some of these were commissioned by their overseas patrons, and others, the Justice Tapestry, Peter Cooker's Life of St. Paul, seem to have been produced on speculation and targeted ready-made for sale to foreign collectors. Surviving examples reveal that these speculative productions for international trade reached across the world, including East Asia. For centuries, the town of Kyoto in Japan has treasured Story of Troy tapestries woven in the Brussels workshop of Nicasius Arts. Over the years, they've been cut, amended, and somewhat inventively changed to be remounted in these civic paget wagons. But nonetheless, the dies and the palettes give you a sense of how marvelously well preserved they are. And really, you can get a true sense of that incredible palette and the original appearance by comparing the Kyoto tapestry with another edition of Arts' Story of Troy, which is formerly in the full collection in Washington, D.C. These early modern Flemish imports to East Asia set into motion a magnificent ripple of local responses. This is from a group of Chinese 17th century needleworks, tapestry scale, responding to the Flemish Story of Troy tapestries. Or the 19th century Japanese weavings responding to those same tapestries by Arts in Kyoto. And in fact, this pair of details I'm showing you is taken from the fascinating research published by Masako Yoshida on this phenomenon. You can probably make it out. The Brussels tapestry is the one on the left, and the Japanese response is the one on the right. There's also the fruits of archival research, and here we're really indebted to the likes of Koen Broosens, continuing the work of Guy Delmarcel and the Duvergers, when we see the weavers taking the initiative to produce tapestries for the international market. In the 1470s, we've got the likes of a Brussels-based weaver, Gillis van der Putte, for example, who worked on numerous occasions with a London-based dealer, John Passmer, to produce tapestries based on cartoons from both their stocks for sale on the open market in England. In the same vein, famously, Antwerp-based designer Pieter Kokke van Aalst, Brussels master weaver Willem der Mooyen, and dealers Pieter van der Walle of Antwerp and Jacob Reilinger of Augsburg banded together on a speculative venture to sell figurative tapestries to Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent. Though that plan failed pretty spectacularly, the experience lies at the root of Kokke's customs and fashions of the Turks' woodcut frieze. And you can see it on the top here, displayed in toto at the Met in 2014, and a close-up of one of those very tapestry-like episodes underneath. More than 150 years later, Flemish entrepreneur weavers were still taking risks, producing magnificent tapestries at their own costs on speculation to offer to international markets, though sometimes it does feel a bit like a swan song. The Antwerp weaver Cornelis de Waal, for example, touted his workshop's incredibly expensive Amadis and Oriane series as you heard in the title, zo'n mooie wandtapijten, such beautiful tapestries, when he was writing to agents in London, in Lisbon, in Vienna, alas, without success, despite their quality. I think the 7,500 gulden price tag was just a little bit too much for people to pay. But you can see here a detail from another edition of the same series and really appreciate how gorgeous it was. And here I just also want to call out this image and many other archival tidbits are published in this book, which I want to warmly recommend. It's probably the most exciting book about Flemish tapestry produced in the last 50 years, I would say, and it's little anecdotes taken from the archival record. It's called Vlaamse Wandtapijten in 50 verhalen, and it's written by Koen Broosens, Astrid Slechter, and Clara Allen. There were, of course, instances of Flemish weavers themselves traveling outwards from Flanders to set up miniature workshops on the Italian and the Iberian Peninsula. Florence, Ferrara, Barcelona, Sicily. They also traveled to London and the English Midlands, to Denmark at Elsinore, to Munich, the list goes on. But it's striking that in the broadest strokes, most of the tapestries enjoyed the world over came from Flanders. They were woven in Brussels, Brugge, and Antwerp. It was truly an internationally sought-after Flemish art form that remained rooted in Flanders and Brabant. By a massive margin, this is not the story of practitioners traveling afield, but the export of the finished works of art. Tapestries, despite their size, being the most portable, the most pliable, and almost always the sturdiest of art forms to transport. They could be rolled up in barrels and slung over horse-drawn carts. The only records of damage are those unfortunate occurrences when whole cargoes were lost at sea, as Philip II of Spain discovered to his cost in 1559. Undeterred, he actually commissioned replicas of the lost tapestries, and this is one of them, ending up being actually considerably more expensive than the originals, double the cost. Tapestry weaving was just too important to the Flemish economy to allow its production to leak beyond the region's 13,000 square kilometers. Already in 1506, Venetian diplomat Vincenzo Querini cited tapestry in the southern Netherlands' top 3 art forms, alongside paintings and music. By 1545, the Medici's agent in Brussels estimated that 15,000 people, that's about 1/3 of the city's population at that time, worked on either the production or the trade of tapestries. To the visiting Italian diarist Ludovico Guicciardini in Brabant in 1567, he said, I quote, "Above all that is wonderful and prosperous there is the profession of tapestries, where one sees works of silk, of silver, and gold, marvelous and stunning in both diligence and cost." So it's not surprising that the city aldermen and guilds navigated a fine tightrope between promoting the medium's international appeal, yet keeping the reins of production firmly within the region. The 1450 Brussels Tapestry Weavers Guild statutes were concerned with quality control. For example, limiting the roles of partially trained apprentices and assistants, and forbidding the use of paint or unspun animal hair to speed up production. Even then, they were concerned about the erosion of Brussels' stellar reputation, and included clauses to prevent tapestries made for sale on the open market to be unlawfully extended once out of Brussels by a specific knotting of their external warp threads. And I've just got this detail up there in the top left corner. You can see the back of a tapestry, and folded over the rough edges of the warp threads, which are the support of the tapestry. And by knotting those in a certain way, they couldn't be then fitted into a larger extended version. Aldermen checked quality. First, of every piece made for speculation, which became unworkable later in the century, replacing it with spot checks by the 1460s. By 1525, stricter measures were introduced, and it was written that these rules were specifically to combat the supply of subpar tapestries to agents of Spanish, Portuguese, and other foreign consumers. Time-consuming production shortcuts, like the painting in of details, were again called out, punished with huge fines and even banishment. 3 years later, the famous Brabant-Brussels city mark was introduced. You can see it at the central detail there, specifically to prevent poor quality illegal knockoffs produced out with the Great Brussels Centre, along with the requirement for registered Brussels workshop identification. So you see the BB for Brabant, Brussels, and then the detail on the right of the slide, a detail of the registered weaver's work. In this case, it's the great Willem de Pannemaker. In 1544, an imperial edict supplemented this region-wide with the obligatory use of recognized official city marks for tapestries woven in Edinge, in Brugge, Oudenaarde, and Antwerp. And for 300 years, it worked, with tapestries a conduit for Flemish design all over the known world, but continuing to keep a massive percentage of the population comfortably employed in the bargain. Thanks so much.